Hey, what's up, everybody? Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Controls and Remotes. I am one of your co-hosts, Agasicles. Here with me tonight, as always, I have Mr. Peter Morrow
How's it going?
and Mr. Jonathan Reyes.
Hey, what's up?
Not a mucho, nothing but me and my 32-ounce cup of coffee in my Yeti Permaheat container. So, uh, tonight's episode, the remote section, is on 2001: A Space Odyssey. So, I don't know if this is going to be pretty, but I do want to talk about this movie. And I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to start off with takeaways and general feelings because I've got three key
Nice.
ones, I think.
Okay.
Number one, this movie is not what people have been telling me it's been about for like the last 30 years. And I think I'm genuinely kind of angry. Like, watching the movie, I felt really bothered by. I mean, this movie is constantly articulated as being a movie about man versus an evil computer, and that's not what it's about at all. Um, there's a few things that confuse me about the movie, as I think is Kubrick's point. Um, I don't know if I don't know if the stuff about the evolution of man and the stuff that occurs between Hal is necessarily related at all. Um, and at most, well, maybe not at most, but and maybe it is, but it's I don't think it's random, and I don't think again that's the central point of the whole movie. A lot of the two principal topics of the movie are completely not disconnected, but take place in very discrete time spaces, completely separated from each other. So that's number one. Um, I don't even know if I can remember the other three. So, um, yeah, that's my big one. I guess I'll let one of you guys give out your overall takeaways. 'Cause I lost my train of thought, but that's the big one again. Is that I think people when they articulate what this movie about tend to focus on um, a very obvious conflict in the movie when I don't think that's the real main message or really what the story is about. So Jonathan, what about you? General takeaways and thoughts, feelings?
Yeah, I remember seeing the first time I got like a glimpse of it. My first year in college, where my professor showed us the part with the monkeys, and they're like kind of discovering all
Sorry.
the things. All good, but yeah, and then it was basically like the dawn of man part where they discover uh, just like how to communicate with the rocks and the violence between each other and things like that. Um, I remember that part, so kind of going to it fully was interesting to see it completely. But it wasn't my type of movie. I was bored, really. I found it dull a little bit. The visuals really good. It's shot extremely well. No surprise there with Kubrick, but
Yeah, is it
um,
just was it just me or do we think that this movie's just been heavily digitally remastered? Like
yeah.
I felt watching this movie, I didn't feel like the cinematic quality was that far off from a movie shot like in the past 3 years.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right there. Yeah, no, it's really like I was surprised at how well it looked for a movie from the late 1960s. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was I would kind of like I said last week with movies when I know when I'm kind of bored is when I'm constantly like checking how much time was left, and I was doing that consistently. Um, I wasn't really entertained. I felt like I was watching almost a documentary kind of. Um, yeah, so that's that's kind of how I felt.
Okay. Well, no, the movie took me 3 hours to watch because I kept falling asleep. Um, but that's not to say that I think it's a bad movie.
Yeah.
It's just I think the closest analog I've been able to come up with is my wife and I don't mind outing myself because I think I've outed myself before. So my wife and I watch some reality television, not a
Yeah.
ton, but we watch some. and one of the things we watch now is The Voice,
Uh-huh.
which is a freaking like triathlon of a freaking television season to get through. Um, but we're watching it, and one of the things I say about like some of the performers is I say that person's not a bad singer, but to me they're just the same thing week to week, and so they don't entertain me and they're not exciting. Like I wouldn't mind going to see them one time, like in a bar, but I wouldn't want to go see that. Like I wouldn't want to buy their whole album or see them like every week. And that's kind of what
Right.
this movie was to me. Is it? I didn't feel it was a bad movie. It just it just I just struggled to get through it like from 30-minute block to 30-minute block. Probably would have been smarter for me to chunk it up that way. Probably would have been smarter for me to watch like 30 minutes at a time over 4 or 5 nights. And I remembered one of my other takeaways too, and Peter, I'm wondering if you'll sync up with this. I don't know if you've seen or if you remember Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the first movie from the original series.
Oh yeah.
Now I get it, right? Like the 15-minute like flyover scenes of like V'ger, and the completely like existentialist like graphic work and stuff of what you were supposed to be seeing inside the cloud in that movie. The whole like literally 10-minute fly around scene of when Kirk comes back to the Enterprise. I feel like because I guess 2001: A Space Odyssey was the biggest sci-fi movie before Star Wars and Star Trek: The Motion Picture came out. And I feel like Star Trek: The Motion Picture was definitely trying to channel things that Kubrick had done in 2001: A Space Odyssey. So what about you, man? What were your overall takeaways and general feelings on the film?
Well, not too dissimilar from either of you. I definitely remembered this one with a lot of rose color in my glasses. I do remember seeing it. I don't remember the visuals being any less stunning. So I think rather than a tune-up with CGI, I think it was just a good quality film scan that we were looking at. Because Kubrick's visuals have always been stunning, and you can really tell the practical effects and lighting that things were just done right, which I liked. Overall, though, I did fall asleep watching this movie. Might have something to do with the Benadryl that I had to take, maybe. But normally I can stick through a movie before the Benadryl knocks me out, and I had some problems with this one. I did have to take it in 2 sessions. I should like the movie because that's what everyone's supposed to do. I'm glad I watched it. I don't think I need to own it.
Right. Well, and again, the nodding off, like you said, I think it has things. I think it has a lot to do with how much sleep we've gotten, and when we watched it during the week, that was definitely the case with me. I was up, later than I should have been last night, and up very early trying to get caught up on the postings for all our past episodes. But I love Star Trek: The Motion Picture, that first movie, and I will frequently nod off, typically during those V'ger flyover scenes, in other sessions, other things in the movie. So, I think my third takeaway, I kind of had to chunk that up too across in between your guys' input. My third takeaway is this is a classic Kubrick half movie for me, like the dawn of just like Full Metal Jacket, right? Where like to me and to a lot of people, the awesome part of that movie is on Paris Island, and then once they leave Paris Island, a lot of people you may as well turn the movie off. It's kind of the same way for me for 2001: A Space Odyssey. I love the Dawn of Man stuff, like that Dawn of Man. Like I feel like Kubrick could have done a whole movie on that, with no spoken lines, for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I would have been completely fine. So yeah, so casting. So and this is another part I think that made me struggle to get a grasp on the movie. I didn't see or know or was aware of any notable casting. The most notable cast that I saw was the part of Frank was played by Gary Lockwood, who was Lieutenant Commander Gary Mitchell in the pilot episode that aired of Star Trek: The Original Series.
Yeah,
And I
that's right, he was.
like like everyone else was like may have been well known at their time, but as far as I can tell, didn't necessarily propagate beyond 1968 in anything notable.
Everybody seemed really stiff too, in
Yeah.
my opinion. Uh, Very formal,
Yep.
which I guess kind of fit the setting. There.
Yeah, I mean, so we're getting a little bit into cast chemistry, and that's I'm trying to get a handle on whether or not I felt the performances were poor. You know, a, a lot of what I struggle with is I struggle with the notion that I could say that the movie is visually stunning in some ways, particularly for 1968, but like nothing happens, right? And that's probably, and I feel like it's unfair to say, but in cast chemistry, the only real chemistry you had was between Frank, Dave, Frank, and Hal. Um, I mean, and crap, that says it right there, right? Your three characters that occupy most of the screen time are named Dave, Frank, and Hal, and I don't know how more plain of a three-name mixture you can get. But there's one scene between Frank and Dave, right when they go into the pod and close the door and cut off all the external comms. And that, like you said, Peter, that scene is very kind of matter of fact and very pragmatic and a little deadpan. And 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 I originally came away saying, "Oh, geez, that was such a boring scene." Like they could have. But then I'm thinking, well, you have two guys on a spaceship where the other three people are in hibernation. Maybe you do. Maybe that's just who those characters are. Like two really cool, level-headed, kind of cool cucumber kind of guys who like they're not going to get overly agitated about anything.
Yeah, and doing in doing the kind of a little bit of my own research, when I was obsessed with The Martian and it coming out, there were a lot of interviews that of astronauts saying, well, yeah, we're kind of very much deadpan and matter of fact because we've trained so hard that every single situation that can go wrong that we can foresee at least we've trained on how to handle it. So it's not a matter of panic. We have procedures that we already know how to do, and this kind of felt like that to me. Very much all right, the computer's kind of weird. Maybe it shouldn't be in charge.
So Jonathan, anything on cinematography and editing?
No, it's like I said at the top. I mean, it's a beautiful movie to look at. It's
Yeah.
shot well, cut well. I mean, nothing can be said wrong about Kubrick's kind of cutting and pasting of a movie. So it's good.
No, yeah, I'd agree, Peter.
Yeah, when it comes to Kubrick and his mastery of cinematography, I would compare him to Ansel Adams in photography. And if you don't know who he is, he was a pretty prolific photographer and who would spend years on one print just trying to get it exactly right. And I feel like Kubrick is kind of a kindred spirit to that, who would demand that perfection of craft.
Yeah, there's not much I can say about the cinematography. Like you guys mentioned, whatever the science is behind whatever they've done to preserve the film, I feel it looks freaking amazing.
Yeah.
Um, like again, especially that Dawn of Man first segment, which was what was that? It wasn't an hour, maybe like 20 minutes.
20, 30, yeah.
Yeah. Um, just looks gorgeous. And of course, then on top of that, you have some very patented Kubrick style scenes, right? You have what I call the Nostromo flyover of the Death Star, Jupiter 1, which like every science fiction movie since has replicated. But it was still awesome to see, like knowing that either that rendition in 2001: A Space Odyssey was either a very early instance of that or maybe the first instance of it.
And it's a model,
Yeah,
literally.
and it looks great.
Yeah.
It looks like as it was flying by, I'm like, man, somebody actually like put that together with their hands, and like created all that detail on it such that it's not like I didn't feel that it looked, like ghetto in comparison to anything that Lucas has done or anything that we're doing digitally now. It was kind of funny to me the rearward facing antenna, and I'm like the communications array, and I'm like I guess they're literally saying that they've got the dish pointed backwards to transmit and receive directional messages from Earth.
Which makes sense.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have the antenna on the front of the ship if it's pointing away.
No, well, usually now you'd have the antenna like in like a bubble, and
Yeah.
it might be rotatable. So that was the notion of a fixed communications array just was jarring to me in a 21st century perspective. But I was like, huh,
Right.
yeah.
It is interesting to think that this movie takes place 15 years in the past.
Well, yeah, yeah, it's always kind of, I almost want to say cute how I guess how much we thought of ourselves as far as where we would be in like 1986 or 2001 or anytime there are these movies that paint like this in the near future kind of thing. And one of the reasons I was a proponent of watching this movie was because in 2001, for me being the tech guy, frequently gets invoked when we talk in a lot of discussions in the technology community as far as things that mimic designs of the past. I think where tablets are concerned, I think a lot of us tend to always harken back to like Star Trek: The Next Generation, but the reality is 2001 had tablets. They were. That was a very ghetto render, but the notion of a tablet-based computer was shown kind of there. Wearables. I noticed that one of the guys had like a wearable, what I think was supposed to be like a smartwatch, on, and the design was such that that the whole thing was very level, that the timepiece was inside and encased in the band, and the whole thing was like a unitary chassis all the way around. Which is how some smartwatches and fitness bands are today. So, and then going back to the iconic cinematography, like the running scene on Jupiter 1, where the guy's, I guess he's running around the deck as it's rotating.
Right.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty awesome, and how like there were points where it looked like he was running downhill. So I thought that was pretty awesome. Overall, I guess if I were going to say something about the cinematography, overall I feel like it gets an A in cinematography.
Oh yeah.
For a movie made in 1968, and definitely was done better than a lot of things that we see being churned out now.
Now, out of curiosity, when it comes to that running scene, is he always running uphill or downhill?
I think there were points he was running. I felt like there were points he was running uphill because when they were shooting from behind him, there were definitely points where you would see him slow down and look like he was exerting more effort. And like I said, I also saw a point where the canter of his legs actually changed, and his legs were kind of out in front of him more, and it looked to me like he was running downhill. And the only thing I can think of is if it's rotating, if you run fast enough that you're running faster than it rotates, then you won't always be running level. I mean, I guess if you're keeping pace with the rotation, you should be running level. If you're ahead of it or behind it, you'll be running uphill or downhill, I think.
Here, I thought I made a joke.
I'll just say, I guess my thought was something was going on, and I tried not to necessarily piece it all together. But it was cool, was my thing. Comments on sound, music, and audio?
I missed music.
Yeah. It's a very empty movie.
Yeah. But I will say, it was the sound effects that were used were believable. It sounded like some guy in a suit with an oxygen supply that was constantly being fed. Especially for technology back then, they probably weren't thinking about ways to make it quiet. And yeah, I liked all the sound effects. I was severely missing a soundtrack, though. In a lot of the epic flybys, I did appreciate the use of really well recorded classical music. I mean, the opening theme now, I can never remember it. But that's an iconic theme. I mean, so iconic that I think Elvis used it to open all of his concerts.
Yeah.
In the last part of his life.
Oh yeah. I think I know what theme you're talking about.
Sprach Zarathustra.
Oh, Zarathustra. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Jonathan, any comments?
No, I agree. Besides the iconic kind of theme that you hear, it's a very quiet movie that it really relies on the in-scene kind of sounds that you hear. And there's a term I can't remember, but yeah, it's quiet in that way, and I feel like that's a part of what took me out of the movie a little bit, where I just feel like, and I'm not one of those people that watches a movie and I'm just like, okay, yeah, this music's really driving me to really enjoy this, but I just feel like missing that part of it. It just didn't give me anything to kind of feel tense or any sort of real emotion in the scene. It really relied on, I think, atmosphere, and the atmosphere for me that's what bored me. That's what I felt was dull.
So yeah, I guess maybe I sometimes give very story-driven. I mean, like in the most classic sense of sci-fi writing, I tend to give movies a little more leeway, particularly when they are heavily wrapped around the concept of space exploration, and pioneering levels of space exploration, because I feel like they're trying to evoke that cold silence of space kind of ambience. And I don't know if that was the word you were looking for before, Jonathan, ambient noise, because that's what you get a lot of in this movie. There was one point, there are long spaces of time where that hissing sound of like an airlock is going on, and I actually had to pause the movie at a couple points to verify that there wasn't something going on in my house. I was like, man, that noise has been going on for a really long time. So yeah, but I'll mention, yes, I had that sense that there was music missing in the pockets, but what I will say is there were 2 points, or maybe a few points in the movie when they're interacting with Hal. And then at the end, when they go through, when he goes through when he goes to Plaid, right? I guess when he's chasing the monolith or whatever, and then also when he starts encountering himself through time, Um, the Creepshow music, right? The really like wickedly haunting movie that I was like, is this movie about to go like straight up horror or what? Um, but I'll say that because of the pockets of silence throughout the movie, that impacted me and that stands out. Like it was actually discomforting, particularly knowing Kubrick also did like Clockwork Orange,
Right.
and has done movies with a lot of like ultra violence and very graphic depictions of human injury. Like there was, especially in that last scene, I was genuinely like squeamish. Like I just wanted that music to end and to get past that point of tension.
I wanted that whole scene to end. It was really creepy.
Yeah, right. Um, Pacing. Peter, I'll let you kick this one off.
This movie proves to us that Kubrick is a master at cinematography and editing, and also letting scenes run far too long.
Yes.
Um, there's probably a dozen spots where he could have cut the dramatic panning through a scene down and made this movie, under 2 hours. Um, but at the same time, we wouldn't have also gotten those iconic sweeps that everybody tries to copy. And I don't know, so I'm a little torn about the overall pacing. Some of the dialogue seemed to take a long time, and I get it if you're attempting to, slice of life something. You're not showing the action scenes because life isn't full of action scenes. It's life, and okay, but life is boring and it's slow. Um, Pick up the pace a little.
All right, Jonathan, your thoughts on pacing?
Yeah, I don't disagree with all of what Peter said. But I'd add and I hate to keep beating this drum, but that was one of the main reasons why I was so bored was some of the dialogue was flat and it didn't it didn't like invite me in to enjoy it any. And then yes, some of the scenes were just way too long. Um, uh, and it's kind of hinting at one of my no, probably actually I'll save it. But there's a scene that just dragged for me, and I said this has got to end like now.
So for me on pacing, again, same thing I've said. It's like two different movies mashed together. I thought pacing was perfect in the Dawn of Man segment. It Things would happen, and I would have time to sit there and go, "Oh snap, this is about to go down." Like it kind of kind of savor it unfolding, right? Like the whole scene of the one tribe of you know I know they are apes. I they're depicted as apes. I tend to think of that they're more supposed to be Neolithic man or Cro-Magnon or Neanderthal. But there's the one scene where the one tribe, you see him picking through the bones, and I'm like, oh, he's about to figure out bludgeoning weapons. And I could just kind of sit there and enjoy it as he kind of figured it out, right? And I'm like, that that Dawn of Man stuff is so awesome, and it's so awesome in the way. So yes, I'm skipping on to favorite scenes at this point. um, it's so awesome, and it's so telling of Kubrick as a storyteller, in how that still describes the way a lot of segments of society of human society continue to go through these cyclical and recursive escalations from posturing um, through through posturing, moments of equilibrium, back to posturing, and then things where there's a tip over point where things go violent, and that still happens today, kind of exactly as it's depicted in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it has obviously happened. It's so poignant to me because it obviously happened through eras of human history on a massive scale. Um, but it's also even more poignant in when you think of mankind in microcultures that it happens recursively, and that's the thing that I think is so amazing. Like it starts off with the two tribes resolving everything through posturing, right? It's kind of to a certain extent, it's kind of like a bar scene, right? Where two guys are like giving each other like the head fake, like, come on, what you gonna do? There's that aspect to it. And the one tribe comes over the hill, and there's just yelling and screaming and jumping up and down and stomping feet. And the other group just completely backs down. There's the apes living in close proximity to the other kind of herbivore animal. Where the apes are just aggressive and kind of push them out of their way and don't want them in their space. But as food resources start to decline in the area, you see kind of a general reduction in vegetation over time. And then that
tasty meat creatures become good.
Right. That in conjunction with the discovery of technology, the technology of bludgeoning weapons, all of a sudden it becomes, dude, why am I eating shrubs? Right? It's just, in my mind, it's that whole segment is just masterfully crafted, and it's very awesome. So Pete, what about you? Favorite scenes?
All right. Lost John. My favorite scene is the scene where Dave, right? Yeah, Dave is. This is removing the HAL 9000's brain, essentially. It stuck with me for a long time when I first saw this movie, and again now. That scene, you feel like I felt a lot of empathy for Hal. Here he is, and it's monotone, it's deadpan, but he's basically crying for help and screaming, "No, please don't do that," as he's being essentially, for all intents and purposes, murdered by someone whom he was trying to kill a few minutes ago. But it's, if it weren't a robot, it would be a torture scene.
Right.
But it sticks with me, and so it's my favorite scene because it kind of it works for me as hey, an intelligence is an intelligence, and do we really have the right to eliminate that intelligence?
Right. So let me ask you. There was one of two ways to kind of run the show tonight, right? One of them is kind of doing our standard framework, which it turns out is what we're doing. The other approach could have been to do this as a complete intellectual breakdown of 2001: A Space Odyssey, because it is a very esoteric movie with lots of pockets to get into in terms of deconstructing what the movie is about and what Kubrick is trying to convey, even in just the simple mechanics of what is this scene depicting. So I wound up not wanting to go that way because that could be easily a 2-hour episode.
No, I think you're underestimating.
Right. So let me ask you, what is your whole thought on what was going on with Hal? Was this just a standard, arguably random malfunction? Was this was this action that Hal was taking because he was aware that the monoliths were accelerating the evolution of man, if that's how you choose to interpret it, and he was becoming, and he was fearful of what mankind would become, in terms of, and in terms of their exercising their reign over computers and machines, or meaning was Hal's objective to make sure that they never reached the monolith, or do you think Hal was operating under some ulterior directive that he had been given to make sure that to basically select one of the astronauts to make it to the monolith?
Okay, that's a lot. So here's my take. So going back to the dawn of man, mysterious black space rectangle appears, and magically the tribe that encounters it develops weapons and then technology and accelerates the dawn of man. Fast forward to the moon, and it was the moon, right?
Yeah, where the other monolith showed up.
Yeah, we discover another monolith, and at that point, we start having some larger problems with Hal. Before that, Hal is a computer. After Hal encounters the monolith, whether directly or indirectly, Hal now becomes an emergent intelligence. And apparently, through this monolith, the first thing that emergent intelligence does is lash out against the tribe that has dominated and or threatened it. At least that's what happened, in my opinion, in the Dawn of Man. So I think Hal is that emergent intelligence.
So it sounds to me like, are you saying that you view the sci-fi part of the movie as a parallel to the Dawn of Man sequence, with the roles of the two tribes being portrayed, one by mankind and the other by Hal?
I like the way you put it, yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I would have never.
That's kind of that's how my brain is assimilating it all.
Wow.
So I feel like that's what's going on with Hal.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. I would have never put it together that way, but that's awesome.
So then I liked your hypotheses though too. Any one of them could be true. I mean, we don't exactly have Kubrick around to interrogate.
Right.
Tell us what you mean.
Yeah, it's a complete rabbit hole. Like, I go back to like the first sequence of like the first indication that there's a problem when he tells them, "Hey, the communications array is going to go down. Like, why don't you go check it out?"
Yeah.
And they get it, bring it back in. There's nothing wrong with it. And then Hal's suggestion is, well, why don't you put the old unit back in, and we'll wait till it breaks, and then that will give us a definitive root cause for what's wrong. And I'm going through that now. NASA engineers and scientists are a step beyond normal engineers, but my engineering mind, when that happened, I was like, dude, are you flipping crazy? An EVA is a high-risk event. We just completed one. We've swapped the module out. That module should last forever. Let's keep this one inside as a spare.
Yeah.
Right? Why risk going out to swap out a known good working module? So,
and quite frankly, and this is my own engineering education coming out, when you replace something as a troubleshoot, you don't put the old thing back to further troubleshoot. I mean, you're taking steps to eliminate things. Hal?
Right. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Or by the same token, I could also argue, and maybe if they present it this way, I may have agreed with you. I could also argue you also don't troubleshoot by swapping parts,
right,
when you have limited spares.
Yeah.
So if you had known So arguably maybe they should have figured out why the unit was failing first before they swapped it apart. Because again, and I've had this happen, I've had engineers come back to me and say, hey, we swapped parts and it just started working again, right? And then when it fails again, don't come back and ask me for a third spare, because I'm going to say, clearly it's not the part that we're swapping out, it's something else. And if we put a third one in, we're going to damage that one also.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that whole thing, I'm like, why? Like, what is the point in that? Like, is he... I mean, if he needs to kill one, he can do that. So, I don't know. Like I said, I won't go there because that's the whole danger of the rabbit hole of this episode. So, Jonathan, what about you, man? Favorite scenes? And you can do your favorite scene, worst scene, and then if Peter and I have a worst scene, we'll swing back around.
Well, I think we just went over ours.
Okay.
Favorite scene might be what you guys were just talking about. Tell me if it is as I'm saying it, but it was when he puts on the suit to protect himself, and then Hal shuts off the oxygen and goes to the brain room to shut him off, and then Hal, Mr. Bowman, yeah, I'm scared, whatever whatever he says, and then he loses all his memory, and then he just remembers that song. That was my favorite. I thought that was pretty neat. It reminded me. I'm trying to remember. It was like the more sci-fi thing that I saw in the movie. I was like, oh, I see what they're kind of doing there. And then my worst, you get, Agasicles, you've kind of touted it the whole episode. The Dawn of Man stuff, didn't like it at all.
Oh, okay.
I really didn't. I was sitting there saying, what am I watching right now? That was kind of my reaction the whole time. I mean, it was interesting, and it starts off where it's like, okay, this is Dawn of Man, and then you see the space like rectangle. I'm like, okay, now this is getting weird.
That's where it gets weird.
Yeah, I mean before that too. But yeah, so I would say my favorite is the Hal Hal stuff, and then worst would be the apes.
Okay.
Just a quick aside, kind of funny. So I watched that scene while running on my treadmill Wednesday night, and I run after my wife goes to bed because I like spending time with her. Go figure, right? So I get it on, and I have to crank up the volume naturally because I'm on a treadmill. And my wife comes out and it's like, who is burping? Because of the muffle of the walls and the doors, she has no idea what's going on, so she's trying to figure out what the heck I'm watching.
That is awesome. So, and Peter, you're saying your worst scene is the whole thing about swapping the part out?
No. My worst scene, honestly, is the acid trip at the end when he's going through the wormhole and encountering himself at different points of his life. Right. I mean, it's iconic. I've seen it done in so many. It was even done in Phineas and Ferb, which is a cartoon for kids. Right. It just didn't work for me. I felt like I needed a drink after it.
Cool. And I'll go through what I would actually declare my favorite and worst scenes. Like I said, I love that Dawn of Man sequence, but I didn't want to declare a whole big swath of the movie to be my favorite scene. I won't do a whole breakdown, but my favorite scene is actually when Dave gets back to the ship in the pod after trying to recover Frank's body, and Hal has locked him out of the ship, and is a complete smartass when Dave says, "Well, I'll just come and use it." It's such a sniping conversation. It's maybe arguably the wittiest dialogue in the movie, where Dave says, "Well, I'll just come in through the emergency airlock," and Hal says, "Well, that's going to be pretty difficult without your helmet," because he left it inside the ship when he departed because he was in a rush.
Don't they flash to the helmet that he left?
Yes, they do. Although I highly questioned why would he have not, because at this point he has Frank's body in the claws outside the pod, And I'm like, why didn't he try and figure out a way to get Frank's helmet? But at any rate, my favorite scene, or my favorite part of that scene, is then when he basically backs the pod up to the emergency airlock where there are emergency blow bolts on the hatch, and blows the hatch directly into the emergency airlock, and kind of punts himself into the ship, and just basically lucks out when he comes back, getting sucked back out the airlock because it's not sealed, and doesn't go right out the door, but gets hung up on the side bulkhead, and is able to get the door closed. So that was my favorite part, because I feel like it's the one instance where Dave actually outsmarts Hal.
It was my close second, and I liked it. The reason I liked it was because they accurately portrayed an explosion in space.
Yeah.
There is no sound in space.
Right.
Vacuum. There's nothing to transmit the energy.
And my worst scene is kind of a lengthier segment of the movie. It's the stuff that happens after the Daughter Man sequence, where just because it felt just very contrived and janky, which is the director of I don't know, of the mission or whatever's going to be done about this monolith that's to be discovered on the moon, is heading to the moon to talk to the personnel there and give them some direction about what's going to happen. And he gets picked up by the security guy, and he asks him, "Hey, do I have time for breakfast?" The security guy says, "Yes, I've actually had a table reserved and prepared for you." And they're going into the cafeteria or whatever, and this doctor says, "Hey, hold on a second, I need to make a couple phone calls." So right there, I'm like, how long is this guy supposed to wait? So he goes in, he calls his daughter. At that point, I'm okay, I'll deal with it. But then he comes out and then sits down to have a conversation with the Russians. And I'm like, how long is this friggin' security guy waiting for you at breakfast, dude? It's like 20 minutes of the movie. And I'm like, it just felt like completely disjointed. And I was like, really? And the whole time, and I know I shouldn't be thinking about it, the whole time I'm thinking, what is the security guy doing right while he's waiting for this guy to make his phone calls, talk to his friends, have a drink, right? So, okay, so that is
Must
it.
not be very hungry for breakfast either.
Right. So that's it for me. So at this point, we have watched our first 4 movies. I say we have completed phase 0 of the launch of our new show. Congratulations to us. Golf claps all around. Let's talk about running down the 4 movies that we've watched in ranking from our most enjoyable to least. And again, we'll try and do it quickly without getting into too much detail. But just to recap, so at this point we have watched Forbidden Kingdom, starring Jackie Chan and who's the other guy whose name I'm forgetting? Jet Li.
Jet Li.
We have watched Deep Impact, headlined by Tia Leone and Elijah Wood. We have watched Rising Sun, starring Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery, and now we have watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, starring no one of note. So,
Well, there's no one anymore.
so Jonathan, we'll start with you, man. How do you feel about those movies from 1 through 4?
All right. I'm gonna go 4 through 1, if that's okay.
That is absolutely
I like
acceptable.
to go backwards.
Yeah.
So last I'm gonna put Rising Sun.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. I'll just leave it.
Okay.
Number 3, I would say 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
Number 2, Forbidden Kingdom, and number 1, Deep Impact.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Peter, what about you?
All right. So for me, 2001 is number 4. Number 3, we got Rising Sun. And then my number 2 is Deep Impact, with number 1 being Forbidden Kingdom. It was just so much fun. And, I mean, really the difference between number 1 and number 3 for me, number 1, 2, and 3, is very tight. we're talking, half a point maybe spread between 1 and 3. But 2001 it kind of dropped down. Honestly, I'd rate it at around 5. How about you,
Yeah.
Agasicles?
Uh, so, um, so for me, and unfortunately, people are going to hear me typing because I'm trying to record this for perpetuity. Um, so for me, number 4. Uh, I guess I got to say it's 2001 for me. Um, number 2 is Forbidden Kingdom. I mean, sorry, number 3. Uh, and then number 2 for me is Rising Sun. I actually like that movie. Um, and then number 1 for me was Deep Impact. Just again, I was reminded how much Deep Impact I'd forgotten over time, and I guess that's why it's good to periodically revisit these. Yeah, I've talked before, and I'm sure you guys kind of have the same perspective that it's a big difference between like how you interpret Watership Down as a 15-year-old versus a 32-year-old, right? Or Lord of the Rings, or Mark Twain, or any of those things. So, revisiting things like this from time to time, I think, is a big deal. But yeah, so for me, from 4 through 1, it'd be 2001, Forbidden Kingdom, Rising Sun would be 2, Deep Impact would be 1, just because, like I said, I'd forgotten how, like, just how that last 30 minutes of Deep Impact just, like, emotionally takes me apart, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I literally felt drained after watching that movie 2 weeks ago.
Seriously.
Yeah. So yeah, as opposed to Armageddon, which kind of is more of a Armageddon. You walk away from it coming down off an adrenaline high, right? Because you're gripping the arms of your seat as like something goes wrong every 5 minutes. Just a different movie. So nice breakdown, guys. Nice ranking. I think that will be very cool. And since I recorded it, we can actually include that in the post when we go to maybe do this again for May. So Jonathan, anything on the box office this weekend?
Yeah. Let's see. So we have. I'll go 5 through 1. So 5 is Barbershop: The Next Cut at 6.1 million. Number 4 is Mother's Day at 8.3 million. This was it tanked. So Mother's Day. Okay, never mind. 3 was Keanu, which is the Key and Peele like movie, whatever. 9.35 million. Number 2 is The Huntsman: Winter's War, 9.39 million. And then number 1 is Jungle Book again, 42.4 million. And it's, I think, this third week.
Yeah.
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 Wow. So 2 through 5 basically rank up or basically collected like 32 million.
Yeah.
And then you had a big, the big runner out front. This is not a horrible weekend at the box office.
No. Yeah.
Pretty soft though, but not as soft as other weekends we've seen.
Right.
And probably very much a weekend where people are just kind of holding up, waiting for Civil War.
Yeah. Yeah, that's gonna be the big monster next week.
Yeah. Which with coming soon, like we don't need to do coming soon this week. The only thing of note really apparently other studios are not stupid and nobody wanted to release Jack against Civil War this weekend because it's the only thing of significance coming out. Everything else is like a limited release coming to like less than 1,000 seat theaters.
Yeah, I mean they're projecting. The last projection I saw for Civil War was 200 million.
Wow.
I would not be surprised if it hits that.
Yeah.
Or near it at least.
We talk about Avengers a lot, man, but like the Russo brothers and what they do with the Captain America franchise.
Yeah.
I have to give a big nod to Chris Evans, and that's what that comic is like a little like the Captain America comic book to me always feels like the other Avengers title, because there's so many people who show up and so much of what happens in that comic is pertinent as far as part of the storytelling of the Avengers. Um, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
And I want to add, I really think that the Avengers movies, they're kind of the icing on the cake, as it were. They're fun. Everyone gets together. They have a good time. But the Captain America movies, to me, are really the ones that drive the cinematic universe story right now. I mean, big things happen in the Captain America movies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like I said with Winter Soldier, right? This Civil War to me is definitely Avengers 2.5.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's and it's. I guess I've commented on problems before with it. Like, that's what I want the rest of the Marvel universe to be about. It's between. I agree with you, Peter. It's between the Avengers movies and Cap where there's a true sense of continuity.
Yeah.
Especially now that you don't have Agent Coulson showing up at the end of every movie, right? Coulson and Nick Fury, which was a great Phase 1 shtick, right? It's what made you feel like everything was knitted together. But on a grander scale, it's the drumbeat between the Avengers movies and the Cap movies that make everything feel like it's like there's a real sense of comic book continuity. And I wish Thor and the Iron Man movies would do the same thing. So what about what we're watching? Anybody watching anything significant? I have not.
I'm actually pretty pumped for this. I didn't. So I was going through my Google Play library, and I had rented. I actually watched three things, which I was actually surprised by because I don't have time. Peter and I were talking about time at the beginning. But anyway, so the first movie I saw, because of Independence Day Resurgence coming out, I never saw Independence Day ever. And so I said, I don't understand this trailer. I don't see where the connections are. Why is this thing such a cultural phenomenon? Whatever. I might be being dramatic about it, but so I got it for $1. They had it on the Google Play Store for like $1. So I was like, for $1, I'll give it a shot. And so I watched Independence Day and really liked it a lot. I want to see it again. And then so after I saw the movie, I saw the 2 trailers for Independence Day Resurgence, and I'm really excited now for Independence Day Resurgence. So I'm glad I saw that. I didn't expect to see so many aliens. I thought it was just going to be like a tease thing the whole time, which was really cool. Which was really, really cool. Bill Pullman is awesome.
Isn't he just incredible?
He was so good in that movie. He really was.
Well, what's so hilarious, again, and there's a lot of things going on around that not in a good way, but are causing me to reflect on, or maybe in a good way, are causing me to reflect on the benefits of age in terms of a lot of this content that's coming out. I'm realizing now I have more and more of a comparative basis for things like that and more history to look back on. In video games too. And like one of the things that sticks out to me is this is the dude who was Lone Star in Spaceballs. Right? Right? And he's I want to do. I know we said we didn't want to do top 5 lists on the show, but I feel like at some point we should have a conversation about best presidents, and talk about Harrison Ford, Bill Pullman, and some other people who have occupied the Oval Office in Hollywood, and it's the ones that are standouts. Bill Pullman as POTUS stands out to me as just like it's so inspirational when you see him playing the president. So
I was like, I want this guy as president right now, and it was actually fitting.
Like, let one of those guys run for office this year.
I was like, this is so fitting for this year. I was like, wow, I could get behind this guy.
Yeah.
And then I'm not too upset about the whole, since I watched it now, and then I'm reading more into the new one because I'm pretty excited now. I'm not too upset about Will Smith not being in it. I get it; they got most of everybody else to come back, but he wasn't really that significant until like the third act, really. So I'm not too upset about that. I'm just excited to see Bill Pullman and just kind of handing the torch over to the children, which I thought was a pretty cool little thing that they're doing. The other movie I saw was Everett Horn, our entertainment editor, has been he hasn't pushed me, but he brought up Dread. Um, and he told me to watch it, so he kept pushing me. I finally saw it yesterday. Um, it's basically, hey, he actually has a great comparison, Everett. It's basically Deadpool but serious, and that if you saw Deadpool and you saw how violent it is violent like that, but there's no jokes at all. Lena Headey from Game of Thrones is in it. Domhnall Gleeson's in it. Uh, and Carl Urban he plays Dredd.
Amazingly, I might add.
Yes, he was great. The action's incredible, really, really incredible. It's like an indie movie, pretty much. Very tight, but shot extremely well. Really cool. It's really awesome. It's one of those movies, in terms of its story, where I think you have to watch it more than once to really appreciate it. Because the first time, the violence is so like in your face, and they're talking about so many different things that you could kind of get lost. But it's good. It's a nice hour and a half or whatever of just straight up action and fun. It's pretty awesome. And the standout for me is the girl. I know she plays the Judge Anderson, but she was great. Her story being psychic and kind of stuff like that. It was pretty cool. And then the last thing I never thought I'd get into is The Grinder on TV. It's on Fox with Rob Lowe. It's a comedy. I'm not really big on comedies.
Is this
I don't. Yeah,
is
go
this the
ahead.
show where he's a lawyer with
Yeah.
his well, he's an actor playing
Yes.
a lawyer, and his brother is Fred Savage?
Yes.
Okay, all right, yeah,
Right.
yeah. The clips of that always crack me up, but yeah.
I don't know why. It was another thing again where I had Google Play has the free pilots occasionally, and one day they just had like a bunch of free pilots. I said, oh look, this looks pretty cool. I just like hit it, and then when I was watching Independence Day and Dread on my Google Library, I saw it there. I was like, you know what, I could probably watch this after seeing Dread and Independence Day, so I just put it on, and I like it. I binged half the season already over the last 2 days. They're only 20 minutes apiece, so it's easy. But I've never really seen Rob Lowe significantly, and he's very, very good. Um, and Fred Savage, what I really like about it is it's a comedy that's self-effacing. It's the show's The Grinder, and Rob Lowe's character is an actor who plays on the show The Grinder in the show The Grinder. So it has like that kind of shtick going for it, which is really
Right,
funny.
right. Very,
Um,
very meta.
yeah, and then he's so dramatic. He's an actor's actor in the show, and Fred Savage is like the really normal person, and then William Devane's in it randomly. It's really it'll make you laugh. And then now in the mid-season they've added some Jason Alexander's in a recurring role, and Timothy Oliphant is in it as well now, which is really funny because. It's kind of it's not a show you really could care for spoilers, but he leaves the show, The Grinder, in the show, because he had like creative differences. The show it was becoming more about the sex appeal and the objectifying of his character than the actual narrative, and so the show was canceled after 8 seasons, and Timothy Oliphant played his brother in the show when it was airing. And so he becomes the Grinder, and it's the Grinder New Orleans. What they do, like, it was so funny seeing that because it made me laugh because I thought of like what they do with like NCIS and
Right, right.
CSI. It's like CSI Miami, CSI New York. It was just like, wow, they get it. Like whoever's writing the show understands TV and really how silly it can be sometimes. So it's actually really funny. I can't keep watching it. I hope it gets renewed for a second season too.
Yeah. Well, hearing your endorsement of it, that makes me interested to check it out too.
Rob Lowe just carries it. Like he carries that show. I mean, everybody else is really funny too, but it's good. It's a good like time waster.
Nice, nice. So, and Peter, I'll throw it over to you. I'll make one comment in the middle, which is that I know, Jonathan, you're a big fan of Domhnall Gleeson. I did not connect that his big claim to fame before Ex Machina and being in Star Wars last year was being one of the older Weasley brothers.
Yeah.
In Harry Potter. So
Yeah.
So, Peter, what have you been watching, man?
So my wife and I finally finished Daredevil season 2.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. And I have to say, Marvel, if you're listening, please listen. Um, Pairing yourself with a company like Netflix to do these shows was quite possibly the smartest thing you guys have done. All right. And now Punisher's going to be coming out, which I hope they don't screw it up. And
Yeah.
Luke Cage, the trailer for Luke Cage played at the end of Daredevil. I'm looking forward to that. I liked that actor. Um, they're able to tell the gritty, nasty, dirty stories in an episodic form, and not worry about censors or
Yeah.
sponsors or a rated R or anything like that. And it was just a smart move.
Yeah, I can't say enough about Daredevil. That show is so. That's probably the finest showing of television I've seen so far this year. And that I haven't seen Game of Thrones yet, or now Penny Dreadful's back, which is one of my favorite shows that I've ever seen also. But up to this point, nothing touches Daredevil in my opinion this year so far. The way the you can't even say they get away with it, but like the way they do the violence is it's in a tasteful way, and they give you what you want as a comic book fan. Um, like there's a midpoint in the season that my jaw dropped. I think it was like episode 8 or 9. I said, "Oh my god!" Like they just take it one level after the other. Um, it's
Yeah,
so good. That Daredevil's and it's better than the first season, I think. So like
yeah.
unbelievable.
I like the way they're moving along with the story. I I was mad at Matt, um, more than a few times, and Foggy is really becoming the true badass, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
honestly, if you want to hear more discussion on this, guys, there's a podcast on the GW. Speaking of Everett Hart, um, my God, I really enjoyed this season, and I'm also still watching Thundercats when I lift because
Yes.
because I really love bad voice acting.
All right, so I think that brings us to, and we've definitely run long on the remote section, so we will try and hustle through controllers. But before we get to that, it brings us to
Uh-oh.
one of my favorite segments of the show, where we actually live select our next viewing room target. So I have dropped 3 suggestions into the agenda.
And
Fourth,
before you go on, I bet
yeah,
I can guess 2 of them. Is it
okay.
Bring It On and Bring It On All or Nothing?
No, I would have actually. I'm actually okay with Bring It On, and I may have had that as a suggestion if I had focused on the May 1 movies. But and this is going to get interesting because I think as we go over time, we're going to start figuring out exactly what Netflix's algorithm is for when these movies drop, kind of spread out through the month. So, interestingly, they've got 4 drop windows this month. They're dropping a ton of stuff on May 1st, but then they're turning right around and doing a second drop May 2nd through the 10th. Um, so, so I actually targeted movies in the second drop, which will drop tomorrow and be available before we record our next episode. So in the agenda, item number 6, A, B, and C, I've dropped 3 suggestions. Of course, I'm open to others. But I dropped Fourth Man Out, which is the story of a car mechanic in a small working class town who comes out of the closet to his unsuspecting blue collar best friends. Nobody recognizable in this movie that I know of, other than Cord Overstreet, who is a veteran of Glee, which I watched. I don't know. I'm trying to see if I know this director. Um, I don't know the director on here, Andrew Nachman, as having done anything notable. My second pitch is for a stand-up guy. which is the story of I think it's a mob hitman who tries stand-up comedy, which I'm like, that's just got to be hilarious. Um, so, uh, so that was my second suggestion. Yeah, a low-level mobster takes a stab at stand-up comedy while in the witness protection program. Um,
Wow.
and again, nobody here of note as far as credited as being in the movie. And then my third pitch is for The Replacements, which I'm a big sports movie fan. I will admit, what I tend to watch, or I wind up finding B sports movies being very enjoyable for whatever reason. Like I love The Program with gosh, what's that name? I guess it was Peter Newman was in that. Or no, I'm not. I'm thinking of a different actor. I can't remember the guy's name, but this is another one that's a cult favorite of mine. The Replacement, starring Keanu Reeves, Gene Hackman, Brooke Langton, Orlando Jones, who was hilarious in the movie. And I love Orlando Jones, who does great whether he's doing comedy or drama. I love him in Sleepy Hollow. Faison Love is in this one, so it's a few actors. Jon Favreau, who again I just love. I love Favreau, whether he's directing or showing up in movies. And obviously he was also in Deep Impact, which we watched this month. So those are my three pitches. Again, I'm open to others, but the only constraint is that we must pick tonight on air.
I did the other ones I saw. I like Things We Lost in the Fire, which is I think that's Halle Berry and that guy. I forget his oh man, Benicio del Toro. There we go. Okay. I thought that looked pretty good. And then Pleasantville, which looks interesting. It's Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon. I was just interested the way it's done. It's like black and white and color. So I was like, wow, that's.
Yeah, I remember that one when it came out.
And then the other one, that's it. And then the other one, the other suggestion I had was actually The Replacements. So we can count that as I guess, a vote towards The Replacements.
I don't know. What do you think, Peter?
I don't want to think after the last movie.
So The Replacements. Definitely The Replacements.
Think a lot. And I do that, I enjoy thinking, but that one really made me think a lot.
Yeah.
The Replacements, then.
Is that what we're going to do?
That's a good one to just sit and just kind of laugh.
I enjoyed The Replacements when
That's
it
a goodie.
was out originally. It's a good one.
Okay. We will go that way then. I'll highlight it as the pick for next week. So you heard it live. Let's go on to controllers. So this week we wanted to talk mobile games. And maybe appropriately, maybe we'll shoot to tie this up in like 23 minutes. Which is appropriate because I think one of the biggest discussions about mobile games is are they games? And are they games with solely a niche use case, which is I'm standing in line at a movie theater. I'm sitting on the couch waiting for the wife or girlfriend to finish up and be ready to go. I'm at home for Thanksgiving, and I need to burn some time. So I guess I'll start with you, Jonathan. I mean, what space do mobile games occupy in your kind of gaming landscape?
Wow. I had a time, I would say maybe in high school, high school. When apps and things started to rise, around like the 2010, 2011 area, I would say. And that's just my timeline. That's not exactly. I'm just basing it on my own life here. But at that time, I had so many apps on my phone. I mean, we're talking. There was a game called Pocket God that you just like basically play God with these little pygmies and just throw them and light them on fire and things like that. And then there was Doodle Jump, which is probably more recognizable to listeners. Trying to think of some other ones. Oh man, never got into Candy Crush. Sorry, but the then there was a period of time, 2 or 3 years, where I just didn't care for them anymore. I didn't see the point anymore. I didn't see their quality. Um, didn't see the reason to really play them. But recently, I got back into it a little bit with games like Hitman Go, Lara Croft Go, Banner Saga, and then most recently, since it came out, and I mentioned it last week when we talked about what we're playing, is Clash Royale, which is from Supercell. They made Clash of Clans and yeah, Boom Beach, but Clash of Clans is more recognizable because of the ads that they go crazy with now. But um, Clash Royale has been occupying my time for the last month and a half, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. And I think what mobile games are doing now that they didn't do before is there's an addiction gameplay loop to it now, where it's just the microtransactions constantly. I got to get this so I can upgrade this, and I'll wait a few hours to come back. It's that draw to come back. They never had that before, whereas now they do. And once it's got you, it's got you. And you can't let go anytime soon. It does. It'll wear off. It'll become repetitive. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with mobile games now.
Cool. Yeah, you touched on something. That's probably the biggest, like, and I'm always OCDing out about, like, time management and coming up with, frameworks and paradigms in which to, like, put all my nerd stuff, like, in a box that's definable and I can feel comfortable that I have the right amount of time and whatnot into it. And probably the most challenging thing right now is how to manage microtransactions and knowing
Yeah.
how much you spent on a game. I originally, or at least at the first iteration where I cared about trying to manage it, I was originally going to just, like, track, like, in a spreadsheet or something, like, when I dropped money on a game. Not feasible. I'm just not that disciplined to keep up with it. I'm thinking what I want to do now, and there was a time, and before that, what I would do is I just wouldn't play free games. I would only play for paid games. But more and more, I mean, there's been that rhetoric for a while that, free to play games are where it's at. But I didn't necessarily think that was true from a quality standpoint. But more and more that has flipped, and more now there are great games that are available that are free to play. Kind of, if you're into mobile gaming, they're the games you have to play. But I think what I'm going to convert to is I'm going to pick a price point of what I want to pay for mobile games. And what I'm going to start doing is when I get a free to play game, I'm just going to immediately drop 10, 20 bucks on it or whatever, and just get to a point where in my mind, if I've got a mobile game loaded on a device, I know that I've spent 10 or 20 bucks on it. And then I'll make a decision about whether or not I'm going to spend any more on it. But for me, mobile games occupied a big space for a long time because the first year that I was married, I also started grad school for the second time, and then a year after that first year of grad school, my first kid was born. So mobile games became gaming for me. I in that house, I made my study room my office upstairs. And once I went up there for the night to study, I really didn't want to come downstairs until I was going to bed. So just, the friction of taking a study break and going to play my PlayStation, my Xbox, either on the main floor or all the way down in the basement, was just not feasible. My grad school laptop, except for brief periods of time, was typically not a gaming laptop. So I just got to the point where I would have, in my study room, I would have my mobile phone, I would have my PC that I was doing my homework on, and I would have a tablet on the other side. And for my study break, like around 9:30, 10 o'clock, I would just play mobile games for like 30 minutes. And for me, it scaled from the kind of 5 minute like get in get out kind of game, all the way to games that could easily occupy 30 minutes to an hour. So, um, and for me, what I predominantly play is tower defense games and racing games on mobile. So Peter, how about you? Where do mobile games line up in your gaming hobby lifestyle, and kind of what genres of games do you play in mobile?
Right. So, being around when the first and of purchasing age when the first smartphones started popping up that really did something. You got it and you started downloading things, and then Angry Birds came along and you download that. And there was this Words with Friends thing that was essentially Scrabble, and Draw Something, which was essentially Pictionary, and blah, 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 blah. And I played all those, and I realized two things. I don't like people. I don't like microtransactions. And to play a lot of these mobile games, you have to engage with people or pay money. And it drove me up the wall, so I said, screw it, no more games on my phone unless I can purchase them outright. So looking at my phone, I've got like 3 versions of Angry Birds that take, 2 of the Star Wars ones and then Angry Birds Space, which I enjoyed. I play them rarely. I have Fallout Shelter, which is it's Fallout, it's fun. It's like SimCity for Fallout, a Vault. I have Ingress, of course, which I've mentioned. And then I have another one, which is more of a fitness app, but it's got a game component, and that's Zombies Run. You run, it tells a story. At the end of the story, you get stuff. You use the stuff to build your base. So it's kind of like a Sim City for the post-apocalypse that makes you run.
Very nice, very nice.
So that's kind of what I have now. I don't play. Ingress is on when we're going to work and coming from work.
Right.
Because it's something we can do on the go. And occasionally we'll meet up with our friends and go do stuff in the game somewhere we haven't been before. But other than that, though, I'm not a big mobile gamer. The screen is too small, and I have to either pay money or interact with people electronically, which I just don't like anymore.
No, yeah, I get it, and this is why these conversations are so great, because it sounds like Jonathan and I, and what I was expecting. So this is incredibly interesting to me. So Jonathan and I line up in a different space than you do, with regards to where mobile gaming fits. I'm actually surprised at where it fits with Jonathan, because Jonathan, I would have thought, and I'm a little like this now. The reason isn't the same as what you hear on the internet a lot. I would have thought for you that playing on consoles and PC would have occupied too much of your time to allow for mobile gaming. And that's kind of where some things have slid for me now. But what I really expected was across one of the 3 of us, I expected to hear what to me is a very typical perspective amongst gamers. In terms of the universal application of that label, which is somebody having the opinion that mobile games are not gaming, aren't sufficiently sophisticated, and are a waste of time in comparison to gaming on more powerful platforms, which is a perspective that I just have not been able to get behind, and I feel like many people who have that perspective are people who just really haven't dipped a bucket in the well of mobile gaming.
Well, and let's really be clear.
Yeah.
Playing a game is a waste of time. It doesn't matter what you're playing it on. It's a game. It's supposed to be fun. I mean,
it's
doesn't
true.
really matter.
Right. So it's incredibly interesting that neither of us have that perspective. So Jonathan, what are some of your favorite mobile games that you and what I'm looking for is, I mean, so smartphones have been out for a while.
Yeah.
We've all been probably on a couple different smartphones. Um, I've been on more smartphones and tablets than I arguably should, um, but but I'm the technology editors, right? So I get to, right, I'm supposed to do that stuff. But so yeah, what I'm kind of looking for is, as you go from device to device, like what are some of the mobile games that you like always wind up loading on your device?
Yeah. I would say a blanket genre would probably be the ones you mentioned before, tower defense. I'm trying to think. There's one in particular that I really like. I can't think of the name right now. It's like a little series that they have. Oh man. Um, but yeah, games like that are always really fun for some reason, and they always work on mobile too. Trying to see that it was, or even like the real time strategy. I think Clash, the Supercell, the people who make Clash of Clans, I think they've really brought that back, um, and that works as well. Man, I gotta get that name for that game. It's like Kingdom Rush or something like that. Oh man, yeah, it's a tower defense game. It's like like a cute thing. Um, and yeah, Kingdom Rush. There we go. Yeah, Kingdom Rush is Kingdom Rush Origins and Kingdom Rush Frontiers. It's tower defense. It's like knights and things like that. But it's that one I always whenever I change my phones I always look to like get it again. I haven't played it in a while, but it's a hard little tower defense game. But I think it's the most fun and unique one to look at. I like to look at it when I'm playing on a. I think that's also what mobile gaming is too. Is like the cartoony aesthetic I think works best for mobile. I think that's the most attractive on the go. I think that's why games like Clash of Clans works and Angry Birds. Those games work for. I'm not saying that's like the be all end all reason, but I think that's one of the reasons it works on mobile.
Cool, cool. Just some of the ones that I like try and always wind up loading up, and these are just some samples. There's probably other ones. A big one for me is field runners. Um,
Oh yeah,
it's
that's a goodie.
like, and that's a perfect example of what I talk about when I'm like, you can get into mobile games and you can play, flick golf, and just play something that's enjoyable for like a 5 minute spot. There's what is the other kind of little game that I like playing? Can knockdown, which is so. There's all these little physics games, right? Apparatus, can knockdown. Um, there's another one that I'm thinking of. Like I said, flick golf, that are really quick and you can really get into really fast and get out of. But like I can sit and play field runners for an hour, easy. Um, and so when people talk about well, mobile games isn't like this and isn't that, I'm like, full blown PC games and console games I generally don't want to play for more than an hour or two at a sitting. I'm like, so a mobile game like Field Runners that for me has that like just one more turn aspect to it. Like it's in the zone, right? Like I don't know why people would feel like that doesn't do it for them. Um, Another one of my favorite ones when we talk about turn-based strategy, and I'm just gonna bring it up here, is this game, great little war game, which is just so awesome, and you can sit and you can plan out kind of grand strategy. You can think about kind of how you're going to manipulate the AI on the war map. Where you're going to get them to engage, and send units that's going to extend them. In terms of their logistics lines, and then and maybe you're doing that as a feint, and then you roll forces onto some other area of the map. You can concentrate on becoming a big naval power, and that will kind of tip how the battle goes in a different way. You can concentrate on armor versus infantry. It's just awesome, I think. Um, here's Asphalt 8, which I play like a lot. If you go to my YouTube streaming channel, there's a lot of game captures of Asphalt 8, and I play a lot of these. Another thing that I do, I play a lot of the Need for Speed games on mobile as well. A lot, real racing too. One of the things I do is I do go the extra effort of getting a game controller. Things that are built like my PS4 or Xbox One controller that communicate with my mobile phone or tablets over Bluetooth, and use that to enhance my gaming. And I do also, play a lot of these. When I'm playing with the controller, I will put them up on a larger screen, using an HDMI adapter or connector. And then, the things that are really big for me now are these old Black Isle and Obsidian games that are showing up on mobile. Baldur's Gate, Baldur's Gate 2, Icewind Dale. I do have Bard's Tale, which I play every once in a while. Knights of the Old Republic is also on mobile, and I play that now. So these are big, again, in terms of people who have the notion that mobile games are only for 5 minutes. These are big, honking, massive RPGs that were the ones that were of that era that pushed RPGs to this notion of the 40-hour content point, right? And yes, these days with things like Skyrim and Fallout 3 and 4, now we're at the 40-hour main campaign with 40 hours of side missions, right? So we're at the 80-hour point. But again, I don't see myself even completing one of these RPGs on mobile. They're just too big. Much less thinking that they're worth only 5 minutes of my time. So I don't know. That's just that's a smattering of the ones that are kind of my favorites and why I have a pretty healthy respect for mobile. I don't know, Peter. Anything else you wanted to mention on mobile, or Jonathan?
Well, yeah, I won't. Mobile is one of those cool things that mobile gaming. I know I sounded like I came down pretty hard on it, but I actually do enjoy the mobile gaming, and I don't change my devices very often. My cell phone is a 2013 model cell phone, so that gives you an idea. I tend to stick with devices for a while. I can't run Baldur's Gate Enhanced.
Yes.
It's just not good enough, and that annoys me a little bit because I want to.
Right.
And I know it would be a horrible time sink because I love Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
But it's a fond memory from my 10-year anniversary. We were at the coast and it was pouring down rain at night. So my wife and I were just snuggled up in bed, and she was watching me play Half-Life Shelter or Fallout Shelter. I mean, and she would tell me what to do, and it was kind of fun,
Yeah.
So the idea that you can't have a social gaming experience, or a real or a fun gaming experience just because it's on a mobile device is I feel the same way as I do of people arguing consoles. Which is better? Who cares?
Right.
If you're having fun, who cares if your buddy is part of the PC master race?
Right.
It's gonna have to upgrade in a month anyway.
Right. Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I didn't think you came down harshly on mobile games. I read your comments as just saying you tried mobile. There were reasons why it didn't fit as well for you as kind of a central part of your gaming experience as far as time expenditure. But no, most of what I've been talking about as far as attempting to counter is, like I said, the notions that are in there of the so-called hardcore gaming crowd who feels mobile gaming is beneath them,
which is silly.
Right. So we've got like 2 more minutes. I think we're gonna have to skip news this week as well as what we're playing, which is fine. 2001 definitely took us scurrying down a few more rabbit holes than I had anticipated, which is fine. I guess what I'd like to do is take the next couple minutes to talk about what we want to talk about on the remote segment next week. So similar to the Netflix movies, I've pitched a few things. Again, completely open to do others. I put space games there in case we want to move towards at some point maybe having some synergy between the controllers and remotes segments. So we could do space games after 2001.
I'm just going to put it out there that that's a big subject.
Yes, yeah. So we could definitely narrow it down. So go ahead.
And I see a theme for the next three.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wrote that because I know I could have wrote that as like subtopics of one topic. Like you said in space games, if I'd had a notion for how to winnow down space games to something tighter, that's kind of what the racing games kind of reflect. And those came up because of my high degree of being pissed off about the Gran Turismo announcements this week that they're doing some esports excuse for not releasing the next sequel in the damn series, which is the same thing they did on the PlayStation 3. And I'm like, you guys need to just get in a freaking room and finish a damn game. And then I guess somebody added game delays. So I'm up for any of those, or others. Would anybody feel strongly about one or the other?
Not really. I mean, I'm kind of torn between space games and focusing that in on something, or game delays. Cause game delays I put there because I was listening to the Kind of Funny Gamecast, and they were talking about that, and I was like, that's pretty interesting because I have a pretty strong opinion on game delays. But space games I'm open to because you got Mass Effect Andromeda coming out within at least the next year, it looks like. So you could talk about like how Mass Effect maybe transformed the space game, or how it kind of was one of those pioneering games that changed RPGs or something like that.
So I'll throw in a vote for game delays. Peter, what about you?
I was looking at the list, and I mean, space games, I love space. Racing games, I love fast cars. I don't like game delays.
And I thought it would be good timing too, because with game delays, because Uncharted 4 is coming out next Tuesday, May 10th, and that game was delayed twice. So I thought it'd be an interesting kind of
there's a whole glut of games dropping in the month of May.
Yeah.
Like high profile games dropping in the month of May that are all the result of games that were rescheduled out of the holiday season into February, March, which is a trend that we've seen over the last couple of years. But then these games slip further into this May timeframe, kind of creating another. I've been calling it the spring holiday release schedule.
Yeah. It's kind of like becoming the bigger hit. Like it's almost like another big selling time for games.
Yeah. So how about this? Do you guys want to do both?
Yeah.
Maybe next week we'll flip. Since hopefully the replacements won't take a lot of discussion. It's not an intellectual movie. Maybe what we'll do next week is flip and do the controller segment up front, and we'll winnow down something on space games, and then also do game delays. And maybe we'll segue and cross them over because No Man's Sky is a space game that has been delayed that's coming out this month.
Yes, that's a good one.
This month or next month. So why don't we tie those two together and then wrap up with our remote segment?
I like that.
Sounds good. Okay. Cool. Another podcast plan in the bag. So if you want to find me and all my stuff, you can find me on Twitter at Agasicles Stamus. It's 2 S's in the middle. Jonathan, where can they find you?
Yeah, always on Twitter at Wordy Nerdy. I'm kind of like reshifting it a little bit. We're trying to make it a little more interesting for people who go to my Twitter. So it's not just me like ranting on random things, like putting some interesting links and things like that. I constantly am reading, so I always put or listening to podcasts. So I have like podcast suggestions on there, links to good reads in the morning, and so at Wordy Nerdy.
Cool.
On Twitter.
Peter, what about you?
Well, if you really want to see how I make sausage, you can follow me at Edrickson_Taro.
Nice, nice. And things in the pipe. The one thing I'll stump is so the nice thing about being managing editor is I get to change my own tower assignment from time to time. So I've
Nice.
moved myself out of comics to entertainment predominantly, and I'm focusing on trying to work in the technology area, which is actually my preferred nerd segment. But so you should see increased tech coverage on the site, both news and editorials. Right now, I'm working on a 2 month wearables shootout. So went heavy into wearables a couple months ago, and I'm trying to tie together an article that kind of defines where they all sit with me. And most recently, I've posted kind of a 2 month midterm experience piece on using the iPhone success as my daily driver, as well as maybe arguably slightly rant piece on why the MacBook One's one USB-C port is not the issue that a lot of geeks and a lot of the media would have you believe. Um, Anything you guys are working on that you want to stump before we get out of here?
For me, it was another pre-show thing I mentioned to Peter, but if you followed last summer, I had a column kind of binging different actors and whatever. I'm bringing that column back soon. I would say within the next 2 weeks. And I'll just say it's kind of exclusive here. I haven't said it anywhere else, but Jake Gyllenhaal will be the person I'm binging. And another shout out to Everett Harn. He's
I find
he,
it I
yeah,
find
go
it
ahead.
difficult to believe that you have not binged Jake Gyllenhaal at any
I
point.
know, I know, I know. So I'm gonna do him finally. The Fassbender one was called the Fassbender Binge, and this next one was also coined by Everett. So this one's called the Netflix and Jill. So
Okay,
that's what it's gonna
nice,
be called.
nice.
So any suggestions of a Jake Gyllenhaal movie to watch, please let me know.
Okay, Peter, what about you?
I really ought to have something coming down the pipe.
Okay, yeah, and I didn't necessarily mean writing wise, just anything that you're
Uh,
doing, covering Comic Cons you're going to, sword events coming up.
Yeah.
I got a Spartan race in a couple weekends. That's gonna
Nice.
suck.
Okay, nice. There's like a chariot race movie coming out, isn't there?
Probably. There seems to be one every like 5, 10 years, and then there's a bunch, and then they go away. It's like the Gladiator movie, you know. It was huge, and then now the genre's gone, and I think it's time for a resurgence.
Okay, very
Nice.
cool. All right, so thanks so much everybody for joining in. If you jump on to watch this later, or if you've been watching it live, I don't think anybody's been watching it live. But thanks so much. This has been episode number 4 of Collectors and Remotes, and we will be back next week with our screening commentary on the replacements, and also a topical discussion on space games slash something more specific in space games and game buildings. So thanks so much for joining in. We are out of here.